Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Tuesday, January 20th. The state rested in the Brendan Banfield trial today. They had 2 witnesses on. This is going to be the shortest episode on this trial yet because the first witness that was on the stand most of the day, she mainly testified about blood spatter and transfer of blood. So the witness is Iris Dallygraph. She is a forensic consulting business, but was in crime scene investigations, including blood spatter analysis with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations. One thing I wish is that the Commonwealth had asked Juliana if Brendan was wearing gloves when he stabbed Christine. I don't think we heard that. If that was something that was said, please let me know in the comments. I just don't remember hearing it. She essentially points out that there were areas of blood transfer on Joe Ryan and also blood flow showing a change in positions, which supports the Commonwealth theory that Brendan staged Joe's body. On Brendan's jeans, they found that cast-off blood from Christine. On his shoes, she points out the stains that are circular, which could indicate falling blood. On the carpet, there were transfer and saturation stains. And another thing that was hard about this morning's testimony is that some of the pictures that she was talking about, we were not shown. So we really don't have the context of what she's talking about. There was bedding over a large amount of saturated blood, and they found Joe Ryan's DNA present in this mixture. On cross, he goes into DNA and what wasn't tested for a while. I'm just not going to get deep into that. She had nothing to do with the DNA in this case, other than what was given to her in the report to know whose blood was found where. He asked her about the images she saw to make her analysis, and she saw images and body cam. She didn't get a copy of all the DNA analysis. She only reviewed what she was given. He asked about whose DNA was on the knife, and DNA was not part of her analysis. He asked if knowing what DNA profiles were present or which bloodstains were even tested for, would it be important in some of the determinations that she's made? She said if a DNA profile was identified in what was given to her, she noted that. And he says on the body cam, there were a number of stains. Some were tested, some were not. Her analysis was based on the documentation, not an examination of the actual physical objects. They do show a photo to Joe Ryan's left thumb that had some bruising, and the defense asks, in your experience, is there a greater likelihood of the stabber having an injury because of the knife? She said it's not uncommon in a stabbing situation. If there's not a hilt on the knife, it can cause the knife to become slippery. The person doing the stabbing, their hand will slip down the blade of the knife and oftentimes leave a big gash on the palm of the hand. And this is why I wish we knew if Brendan had gloves on or not. They show a still photo from some body cam, and he asked if she sees Brendan there. She said there is a person kneeling on the floor, and looking at other body cam videos, the person was identified as Brendan. She's asked if she can see his hands. She said in the body cam she saw his hands, but the photo that he is showing her is not clear. Do you see blood on his hands? She said, I did when reviewing the body cam. And he asked about this particular photo again, and she said it's just not clear enough for her to see whether or not there's blood on his hands. The defense asked, on the 911 call, did you hear my client state something about shooting someone in the room? She remembers something about an injured person and then the shooting. He asked about where Brendan's weapon was found, and she notes that the officers moved the gun twice based on the body cam footage she saw. The defense, the DNA analysis of this area, there were 2 saturated blood stains and then the stains on the mattress. She did not see stains on the mattress with the photos she was shown, but she did see those 2 saturated spots on the carpet. He rattles off areas that weren't tested and asked if it would have been helpful for her to know during her analysis what was tested and what wasn't. And she said sometimes on the body cam, you could just see the source based on whose body was where. So you really wouldn't need to test. You would just assume if that saturated area was right next to Joe, it would be his, and the same for Christine. The defense points out Brendan's weapon was not tested, and she said she would have preferred it had been tested, but she also knows, again, it was moved twice by officers on scene. The defense points out that when an officer arrived, Brendan had his hands on Christine's neck, and then an officer took over trying to render aid. They talk about cast off, which is blood coming off of an object with motion. So when it lands on a surface, the individual droplets will make a linear or curved linear pattern. There were just a lot of hypotheticals put forth about where these stains could have come from, and honestly, that took up most of the day. Is it possible the blood from the gun could have come from the stain on the floor? The witness said it's consistent with a transfer stain, and one possibility is it was laying on a saturated stain or there was just some other type of transfer. She didn't see anything that would indicate for sure that that transfer stain on the weapon came from a bloody hand. This was smart by the Commonwealth. She's asked if looking at the autopsy photos of Joe Ryan, did you see any wounds to his hands? And she did not. That was done essentially to throw a wrench in Brendan's version of events that he walked in and found Joe Ryan stabbing his wife. She's asked if it's possible that Joe could have tried to get up after the first shot. She said it's possible, but after the second shot, that projectile was recovered from his spine and it had pierced his heart. So no. Again, more hypotheticals. The last witness for the state was very quick, Gary Benson, Christine's father. Brendan and Christine were married June 12, 2010, and had a daughter that was born in 2018. He was at the hospital when she was born. When Christine was a child, she had a lot of bloody noses that caused him concern. They were very frequent and hard to stop, so they took her to a couple of doctors. Lots of objections here from the defense about him essentially testifying to medical stuff, saying they would need a doctor here. And some of those were sustained. The Commonwealth goes into when Christine was preparing to give birth. Did she take any precautions? And he said, yes, she had to take medications. On cross, as an adult, did Christine play kickball and volleyball? He said she played non-contact sports. Did she take precautions like wearing helmets as a kid? Yes, but he doesn't know as far as if she did or not as an adult. Were you aware she did obstacle courses like mud runs and her dad was not aware of that? And after that, the state rested. I really wish they would have asked some questions about Christine just as a mother and as a human and as a daughter, because I really feel like in this trial, Christine and Joe have gotten lost in the hoopla of the au pair affair and all that other stuff. I just feel like we haven't heard hardly anything about these victims, and that always makes me sad. If there's a conviction, let's hope we have some very powerful victim impact statements. So obviously, after the state rests, the defense is going to ask the indictments be tossed. And he says the Commonwealth didn't have any timing evidence or any confirmational evidence. First, they didn't prove if Christine abandoned her devices, and then the scheme came into place. We haven't heard from a single detective, command staff about the investigation except for Detective Leach. And his purpose was to introduce the items of evidence that he took photos of. He also says there's nothing in the lab evidence tying this to my client. He said this situation wasn't of my client's making, and I believe there's an obligation. When you have someone who has changed their story so many times, he didn't say the name, pretty sure he's talking about Juliana. He says the Commonwealth missed their target and asked she strike the 5-count indictment and the child-related charges. Commonwealth gets up and says the evidence presented is he shot and killed Joseph and stabbed Christine while his child was unattended in the basement while weapons were unsecured and being used. The scene was staged by Brendan and Juliana, and they believe the evidence is sufficient. The judge ruled there was enough evidence to move forward. Tomorrow, the defense case will start. He says they have about 4 to 5 witnesses, and it sounded like 70 pieces of evidence to introduce. I was shocked they didn't even bring in digital forensics. So we will see you guys tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the start of the defense case. The big question, does Brendan take the stand? I thought maybe he would. I'm leaning towards no. Let me know what you think in the comments. But, it's very possible by the end of the week we have a verdict if they go quick with it. So we will see. But that's it for today. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.